Hey everyone, this is Ben with the Tiger's Den, and let's talk about the new Planeswalkers from Throne of Eldraine. So Throne of Eldraine is going to have 3 new Planeswalkers in it, and I've seen a lot of people on forums, on Reddit, things like that, just asking, people say that these Planeswalkers are good, and I'm just not seeing it. So what am I missing? And I figured I would just put together a quick video and talk about that for a bit. So, we're going to start off with Garruk. Here he is, big old 6-drop Planeswalker. Before we get into it, if you think this art looks a little familiar, that is because the artist, Eric Deschamps, also did Garruk Relentless back in the day in the original Innistrad set. So I like that they brought him back for this, because this is kind of when Garruk started his, going crazy, becoming a murder hobo after being cursed by Liliana arc, and now that he is emerging from that arc, we have the same artist coming back to do his art again, which I think is really cool, and even, being decked out in the same way and everything. So good on you, WotC, good on you, Eric Deschamps, well done. But onto the card itself. So this is a 6-mana Planeswalker, 5 starting loyalty, it's 4 generic, black-green. And first ability, 0 loyalty. Create 2 2/2 black and green wolf creature tokens with, when this creature dies, put a loyalty counter on each Garruk you control. -3, destroy target creature, draw a card. And -6, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +3/+3 and have trample. So, as you can see, this is going to be a mid-range control, high top-end Planeswalker because of that 6 mana cost. But of course, because you're in green, you can ramp that out a little more easily than you'd be able to in other colors. Like, you might actually be playing this before you'd be playing Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, or Nicol Bolas, Dragon God, or whichever one the War of the Spark Bolas is. So, but feels a very similar role to those, with a 0 that helps put you ahead with card advantage, a -3 that destroys a thing you don't want to be there, and then a -6 that is very powerful and can win you the game. So the big difference here, though, is that both Big Teferi and Planeswalker Bolas, their plus abilities don't really impact the board when they're used. They can, like, you can end up affecting the board, like, by casting a removal spell after untapping lands, but on its own, it doesn't really do that. Whereas Garruk's ability, while it doesn't give him loyalty immediately, it often does if your opponent attacks into you, and it builds a lot of board state. And, 2 2/2s is not a great rate of return for a 6-mana card, but with the other ability stapled onto it, the ability to do it every turn, and the ability to grow his loyalty, that's really powerful. Because you'll notice it only takes 1 loyalty to get Garruk up to his ultimate. And if you have any kind of board, that ultimate is going to be very, very difficult for your opponent to beat. So the thing that you have to realize with this Garruk, and I won't spend too long on him because he's pretty straightforward, but I do want to talk about this fact that, with like Creature Bolas or Teferi, there's a lot of times where you'll put it down and you'll kind of say, well, I'm far enough behind that tucking or destroying a creature doesn't do much, drawing a card doesn't do much. It's kind of too late for this to do anything. Whereas Garruk, there's going to be a lot fewer positions where that's the case, because if your opponent has a big creature or is 1 creature ahead of you, you can just destroy it. If your opponent is considerably wider than you are, that 0 ability is incredibly powerful, because you're fielding 2 creatures, 2 2/2s, which can trade with or even just eat a lot of creatures that are going to be out there. And when they die, they give them that loyalty. So if the -3 isn't doing it for you, and the fact that that draws a card too is very powerful, the -3. But so if that's not going to be enough for you, like, if your opponent has 3 more creatures than you, that 0 pretty much puts you back into the game, and your opponent is priced into, like, they don't have many good options at that point. They can swing into you and try to kill you. That's probably the best shot at that point. They can use a spell to remove your Garruk, which is not great, because then you cast a spell that got you 2 creatures and got them to use one of their spells, so they're way ahead now. Or if you don't have a spell to remove him and can't just win there, you kind of have to swing into Garruk, because he's going to keep making all these wolves. And swinging into Garruk when he's making these wolves is a terrible proposition. Also, you're in green-black, which has probably the best removal and the best creatures out there in Standard right now. So imagine you play your Garruk, I'm 2 creatures ahead of you, now we're even on creatures, and my only line to get rid of your Garruk is to swing into your creatures, hope that all of my creatures have at least 3 toughness, so that your free 2/2s you're getting every turn can't kill any of my creatures. Hope that my creatures have 2 or more power so I can kill your free tokens. Hope that you don't have a Cavalier of Thorns that's just going to eat one of my attackers. or, you know, a big Hydroid Krasis or anything like that, and that I can get your Garruk down to low enough loyalty that you can't just ult after blocking with your wolves. So that is a really, really hard position for me to come back from, because again, if that -3 isn't doing it, that 0 is putting me in such a tight, like I have such narrow lines where I'm coming back into this game, that's really, really powerful, and again, being in green where you can ramp Garruk out, very nice. Don't have to say much about the ultimate. I feel like if you're in green-black, you probably have creatures and have killed your opponent's creatures, and now your Cavalier of Thorns is a 8/9 trample vigilance, and you're in a really good spot. So anyway, that's enough about Garruk. Let's move on to the Royal Scions. I don't have a higher res picture of this card, I apologize. I don't think there are higher res ones out other than the original Russian spoiler, and I wanted to get the English up here just because then we can read what it does if we don't read Cyrillic. So anyway, the Royal Scions, 3 mana, 5 loyalty, costs generic blue-red, +1, draw a card, then discard a card. +1, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains first strike and trample until end of turn. -8, draw 4 cards. When you do, the Royal Scions deals damage to any target equal to the number of cards in your hand. This card is the one that I've probably seen the most people come down on the "this is a bad card" side, and I disagree with that, although I don't disagree with the way that people are coming to that conclusion. Let me explain. So I think this is a really good card, but I don't disagree with this card is bad in all of these decks. I don't see why it's good. I don't disagree that it's bad in the decks people are thinking about putting it in from what I've seen on, you know, Reddit, forums, Twitch chat, whatever. So a lot of people are looking at the first ability, draw a card, then discard a card, and they're saying, okay, so this is like a value mid-range type thing where you're trying to get incremental advantage by fixing your draws and drawing into your relevant spells and things like that. And they look at the second +1 and they say, okay, so I'm what, like giving my Basilica Bellhunt +2/+0 first strike trample? Like that. Like, the first +1's okay, but that second one doesn't really do anything for me. I don't think that first +1 is enough. Why am I running this card over anything else, basically? Another removal spell, another creature. And I don't disagree with that. I don't think that... I mean, obviously, Bellhunt, bad example, because then you're in 4 colors in a set where there's not that good color fixing. But, you know, that kind of mid-range, value-y deck. I don't think this belongs there, so I agree with that. Other people are looking at the second +1 and saying, okay, so this goes in like your aggro beatdown deck, so like... red deck wins but with some blue, and then you're making your Grim Initiate a 3/1 first strike trample. It already has first strike anyways. That doesn't seem great. You're making your Chandra tokens 3/1s. Like, I don't, you know, why do I want that ability? Why is it so good to turn my 1/1s into 3/1s that have first strike? No one cares about that. This is not worth 3 mana. I don't disagree with that either, but what I do disagree with is that those are the places you should be looking to run this card. What I think this card is going to do very well in are decks that fall between mid-range and aggro, and I would classify those as beatdown decks. So if you think about current standard, think about things like Gruul beatdown, with, you know, getting out an early Nissa, putting out some Gruul Spellbreakers ahead of that, and just smashing face. Or like Jund Dinos, obviously that's rotating, so not a great example, but decks in that style, where you're trying to play high-value creatures, a little acceleration sometimes, but then just high-value creature after high-value creature. But you're not doing the grind-out card advantage like mid-ranger control is doing, but you're also not doing the aggro, I'm going to try to empty my hand by like turn 3 and just steamroll you immediately. So, you know, Domries, Gruul Spellbreakers, Marauding Raptors, things like that. So we don't really have a blue-red deck that does that in the current standard, but I would be surprised if we didn't find any decks that this enabled to do that sort of thing. I mean, for one, this is really nice with Red Horde Arcanist, because having a free way... I mean, free, you have to spend the mana to play the card, but having a mostly free way of pumping their loyalty means that you can flash back basically anything in your graveyard at that point. So that's really cool. But another deck that I've been playing around with a lot is a Grixis beatdown deck that, rather than going into the controlling route, it plays your Knight of the Ebon Legion, your Rotting Regisaur, things like that, and assuming that the mana can work with that deck post-rotation, I think that would be a really, really powerful home for the Royal Scions, because think about, for one, that first +1 is very nice when you're in a beatdown style deck like that has a lot of removal, because you have the wrong half problem of you need to draw removal but you drew threats that don't line up well, or you need to draw threats but you're only drawing removal and you need to like get another threat down after being board wiped. So the Royal Scions, resilient to board wipes, start out with very high loyalty because they go to 6 immediately, no matter what you choose. And then they're helping you either get rid of the cards that you don't want, or they're drawing you into the lands that you need, or they're, you know, they're just filtering your draws. They're, you know, that helps a lot with the mana issues, actually being able to filter into the right colors, or just, you know, I drew 2 Disfigures and Allegiance and my opponent's on Grixis control, and I need to kill a Nicol Bolas Dragon God. You know, so that's a very good ability there, but also the second +1 is fantastic there, because look at the threats you have in those colors. You have Knight of the Ebon Legion, so 1-drops are really easy to play Royal Scions after landing a Knight and some removal. Obviously you can't pump on the turn you play Royal Scions if you're playing them on the curve, but in subsequent turns you've got a Knight of the Ebon Legion who is, with 1 pump and without any counters, is swinging as a 6/5 First Strike Trample Death Touch. And First Strike Death Touch is an insane combination, because with Death Touch you only need to deal 1 damage to kill a creature, and with First Strike you're first striking all the blockers down. And then, you know, with Trample too, you're also getting through any damage if they do put something in front of you that's not enough to block all the damage. So you could block with with 6 Gigantosaurs, 6 10/10s, and not only would this Knight of the Ebon Legion kill every one of them, it would survive. So that's how powerful First Strike plus Death Touch is. And then, of course, that's meaning that you don't need to pump Knight of the Ebon Legion for it to get its counters more often and things like that. So very powerful combination there. Also, you have Legion Warboss, which this is a little more subtle of an interaction, but now your Legion Warboss can swing in and also mentor up into a, say, like a Basilica Bellhaunt. If your opponent has Bellhaunt down, you plop this down, you make your Legion Warboss a 4/2 First Strike Trample. You're eating that Bellhaunt, you're able to swing in, mentor another token, and you can also mentor your existing tokens up to higher power and toughness, which is not irrelevant. Or you can, like, you know, mentor up a Knight of the Ebon Legion, get it up to a 4/5, something like that, without having to pump. And then also, Rotting Regisaur. Rotting Regisaur is a fantastically powerful card, but it has that drawback of it's so easy to chump it, and when it's being chumped, it's terrible because you're eating through the cards in your hand while you're waiting for it to eventually connect. Well, now it's not a 7/6 vanilla. Now it's a 9/6 First Strike Trample. Virtually nothing is going in front of that card and surviving, let alone being able to actually kill it too. Like that, there are very few creatures in Standard that will be able to do that, and obviously you'll have your giant Hydroid Crazies and things like that, like a 10/10 Crasis can still do it, but it's much harder to tangle with Regisaur, and that basically nullifies its biggest drawback. And on top of that, if you're playing in a beatdown deck, you've got good removal, you've got good creatures, you're probably keeping your Royal Scions around for quite some time, especially because they're going up to 6. And if your opponent is spending their resources swinging into your 6 loyalty Planeswalker, they're feeding a ton of damage, and they're probably also having to suicide some creatures into your, like, you know, your Rotting Regisaurs and things like that. And and then because we have lots of removal, if they try to, like, triple block our Regisaur, we can kill one of the things after blocks are declared and then just completely blow them out, and there's virtually no way back in from that. So anyway, and also we can discard our Regisaurs if we have cards that we don't want to discard to the Regisaur. Like, there's a lot of board states where it's like, I have 2 Regisaurs in hand and I don't want to cast any of them. Well, now we can get rid of them and find better cards. So I think that's actually a fantastic card in that style of deck. Not necessarily in Grixis, but if there's a blue-red or blue-red X style deck that wants to do that kind of thing, this is going to be a great enabler. Also, it does cool things like you can pitch your Phoenix in the Arclight Phoenix deck, but as we're losing Tormenting Voice and Charticourse, we had Opt announced as a reprint recently, so that helps it, but I think that because this doesn't recur Phoenix, it just helps get it in the bin. We might need another 1 or 2 cards before that's gonna really be a relevant thing. But also, stick this on a Crackling Drake. Your Crackling Drake's now like an 8/4 flying First Strike Trample. That's really hard to deal with, so very cool there too. And then, of course, the ultimate. These guys go to 6 immediately, and a couple of turns they can ultimate, so they can ultimate, turn 6 on if you plus them every turn and they don't take any damage, which, you know, it might be hard to keep the damage off of them, but that's a really threatening ult, because to be conservative here, you're dealing, like 6 damage to a creature, Planeswalker, or their face. Maybe you're dealing like 7, 8 damage, depending on how many cards you have in your hand. That's very, very good. It can just close out a game, it can draw you those cards, and then that can close out the game if you draw like a haste creature or something like that. So, very threatening, and your opponent can't really afford to leave the Royal Scions on the board for too long. And the absolute floor for these guys is that you put them down, you draw a card and discard a card. Worst case scenario for that is you look at the top card and say, this is garbage. Now you return ahead on your draws, and that's very relevant. Just getting rid of a bad card off the top of your deck. We've seen how good that is with, like, Thought Erasure and Search for Azcanta on its first side. And that's the floor, is that you do that, and then your opponent pretty much spends a card to kill your Royal Scions. If they have a strong board presence and you can't block for them, then the floor is actually that you're trading down effectively in that point, but you're also saving yourself on like 6 or more life. And that's a situation where you might want to not play them on the curve anyways and wait until you have a comparable board presence to your opponent. So anyway, that is why I'm so excited about this card. I think it has some great potential, and I also don't think that it is a just auto-include in basically everything that runs these colors, and that is also a great thing. So anyway, moving on from the Royal Scions, let's talk about the last one here, Oko, Thief of Crowns. And first, can we just admire that art for a second? That is some great art. I don't know how to pronounce your name, artist, but hats off to you. Also, second 3-color enemy color, or 3-mana enemy colored Planeswalker here. Which I think is really great, because I feel like I did miss a couple of years of Magic in the last few years, but I feel like I haven't seen many Planeswalkers in these 2 enemy color pairings, the Simic and Izzet, that are low to the ground and high value. Like we've had Rel Izzet Viceroy and things, but that's a 5-drop, and so it's nice to see these really good, I think, Planeswalkers, and I from my recollection, kind of underrepresented Planeswalker colors. So good on you guys again. But anyway, as for the card itself, 3 mana, 1 generic, 1 green, 1 blue. 4 starting loyalty, +2, create a food token, +1, target artifact or creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. And then -5, exchange control of target artifact or creature you control and target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. And this is the one that, while I've seen fewer people saying this card is just bad, a lot of people are saying, I don't get it. Why is this card so good? None of these abilities seem that good to me. And I feel you with that. Oko is a trickster. These abilities are very tricky. They're very tricky abilities, and the lines with this guy are not straightforward at all. Like, with Garruk, you have a big guy, I kill it. You have some guys, I put wolves in front of him, and now I overrun you. Oko is like the complete opposite of that, because all these abilities on their own, like the +1, that's fine. But, it's like the +2, like, okay, well, I guess you might be asking yourself, what's food? If you're not familiar with food, this is food. So it is a token artifact subtype food. 2 mana, tap, and sacrifice this artifact, you gain 3 life. So, plussing 2 on a 3-drop to make a food is, like, the worst rate of return. Like, even getting one of those every turn, it's like, okay, I need to dump a lot of mana into this. It's going to be relevant versus heavy aggro decks, but I don't want to spend my time gaining 3, like, paying double for a worse healing cell because I can't protect my creatures. That's not what I want to do against aggro. I want to feel the board presence and remove their threats. So on that point, the +2 is garbage, but it's pretty cool when you have that +1 there, isn't it? And when you have other things that care about food in your deck. So +1, target artifact or creature loses all abilities, becomes green elk, that's a 3/3. So you can every other turn just make a 3/3, and every time you go through that cycle, you're rolling him up by 3 loyalty. That's pretty good. That is about the best rate you can possibly hope for on a 3-mana Planeswalker. Mu Yanling can make a 4/4 flyer every couple of turns, but she goes up by 2 and then down by 4, and then she's at 1, so she's really easy to remove, whereas at this point, Oko was at 7 instead. That is tough to deal with. That is really tough to deal with when you're fielding your army of 3/3 elk. So, for 1, that's very nice. For 2, the +2 synergizes with that -5. You can make a food, and then, like, oh, it's a nice Hero of Precinct 1 you have. Now it's my enjoy your food, and I gave you this nice banquet, you gave him your Hero of Precinct 1, we're even. So, there's a lot of good 3 or less power creatures out there. There's Hero of Precinct 1, and we're in 2 color anyway, so we probably have other multicolored spells. There's Tithe Taker, which is really good. There's, Midnight Reaper is a 3-drop, and Midnight Reaper is, so when you +1 on something, if you +1 on your own creatures, they don't necessarily become tokens if it's not a token already. So Midnight Reaper will give you the value off of your elk dying if you've turned creatures into them. So lots of cool things that you can swap around there, and you can just give them your mostly useless food tokens. But I want to go back to that +1 for a second, because I feel like this is so powerful, and a lot of people look at it and they say, well, you're giving your opponent, if you use it on your opponent's thing, you're giving them a 3/3. That's not very good. But is it really? Is it really not that good? Because let's say your opponent puts down, let's say we're in the mirror, and I'm playing Temur Elementals, you're playing Temur Elementals, but you have Oko. And now every turn, you're rolling up your Oko, and you're making my, say, like, Cavalier of Thorns or Yarok, if I'm in Sultai, you're making them into generic 3/3s while rolling up and threatening. You can steal my Yarok. You can steal my Yarok for a food. That's insane. And if not, you're just making, you had your Cavalier of Thorns, I have a 3/3, and every turn another one of my high value creatures is becoming a 3/3. Maybe you're stealing my Risen Reefs and then playing a Yarok after that because you didn't have to spend any mana to steal the Risen Reef. Just draw 2 cards, get 2 cards on the field. Insane value off of that. Also, you'll notice that the +1 is target artifact or creature, so that means that we have more main deck standard artifact hate, which is great because artifacts are so hard to interact with a lot of the time, and it's just wonderful when we get these cards like this, like Bedevil, like a Braid back in Kaladesh standard, where we can just have things in our main deck that if there's a really problematic artifact, we can find those answers game 1, and especially in best of 1 formats when you don't have sideboarding, that's really good. So I've said really good so many times, but that's because this is really good. Like, it's not earth-shattering, I can't be too hyperbolic here, but it's very, very, very good. Also, you can do cool combos with Oko, like if you're in Sultai, you can do this cool combo with Dreadhorde Invasion, where Dreadhorde Invasion amasses every turn, so you lose a life, and then you put a +1/+1 counter on a zombie army creature token you control. And if you don't have one, first you make one. So you get your 0/0 with a +1/+1 counter, you roll up Oko, and you can play that turn 2, play Oko turn 3. Roll up Oko. Now instead of having a 1/1, you have a 4/4 Elk, or 3/3 Elk with a +1/+1 counter. The next turn, Dreadhorde Invasion checks to see if you have any zombie army creature tokens. But now your zombie army creature token is an Elk, not a zombie army. So it gives you another 0/0 with a +1/+1 counter. Then Oko rolls up again and makes your 1/1 into a 4/4 effectively. So every turn you're getting another 4/4 virtually for free. That is so good. That's so good. So yeah, anyway, there's just tons of really cool, tricky stuff you can do with this. You can play Gilded Goose, which is our Llanowar Elves replacement. So you can either use the Gilded Goose, use its food token to get out Oko turn 2, or you can play a 2-drop on turn 2. You can play Oko turn 3. Oko turns the food token into a 3/3. Now he's protected himself. So he can also make more food every turn for the Gilded Goose to sacrifice if you need to ramp. Just so many great combinations here. Oh, it's just so much value. I love this card. I think this is an awesome card. I'm actually a little worried about how good it might be in Standard because it's so cheap. So cheap to put down. Not money-wise. I don't know what it costs in terms of paper magic or MTGO. But I actually think if I had to pick an MVP of these 3, I would go with Oko, honestly. I mean, Garruk slams the door hard. Garruk slams the door shut harder than virtually any other Planeswalker we have right now. So let's acknowledge that. But also, he's a 6-drop. Oko's a 3-drop. So I feel like Oko might actually win more games just by virtue of coming down turn 2 or 3 and accumulating this value, even though it's not going to be as big or splashy when he does so. And when Garruk comes down, if you can't answer me, pretty much just lose. So you can say, okay, Garruk won that game. Whereas in the game where you win by a thin margin after playing Oko on turn 2, it's a lot less, well, that was clearly Oko that won me that game. So if I had to make a guess, that's what it would be, that this guy's going to be the number 1 out of the 3 in terms of just the amount of value he offers for his very low mana cost in a color where you can ramp him out pretty easily. So, it's really hard to evaluate Magic the Gathering things because it's a huge, complex game, and all of these abilities are very strange. We haven't had anything very much like this before, especially on having these 2+ abilities do these things. So I could be completely off base on this, and this could end up being a garbage card. But I feel like this is going to be really cool, and at the very least, it's going to be fun. So I think this is just a really cool design Planeswalker that doesn't necessarily go everywhere, just like the Royal Scions, but when it does, it can do some really cool things, and you can do really nice lines with it that aren't even just, use your Planeswalker, kill a guy, use your Planeswalker to, get a token or whatever. So really cool design space here. Really good job, Wizards of the Coast. Oh, I would like to say, with this 3/3 Elk thing, we can now add Elk to the list of things that are just like 50 to 100% bigger than bears all of a sudden. As a lover of bears and all things bears, I feel kind of slighted by this, that ever since Ice Age, I believe, which Grizzly Bears might go back past Ice Age, actually. That's what I think of when I think of Grizzly Bears, the 2/2 for 1 generic, 1 green. It was like, whoa, green is really cool, man, because you can get a 2/2 for 2 mana. That's awesome. And now it's like, bears are still 2/2s, but we have like wolves that are 4/4s and that like make other wolves, and elk that are 3/3s now. It's just like, can bears just catch a break? I mean, we got a really cool bear printed recently, not in Standard, a Bear Lord, but I mean, I feel like can we make bears bigger now? Like, let's make bears great. Let's make bears cool creatures that, you know, we have the term hate bear and all that, and it's a bear for 2/2s. But let's move past that. Let's move our Ursine brethren to a better place. Anyway, that is not related at all, but I wanted to go on that tangent as long as you're here. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on bears, the #1 cuddliest creatures in America. But that's going to wrap it up. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think I'm completely wrong? Do you think that I am spot on with any of these things? Is there anything you would like to see us cover in the future? Anything you think we could do better? Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, whatever. If you don't like it, give us a thumbs down. Let us know how we could improve. We always love doing these things, and we have more content coming to you regularly. So thank you very much again for joining us, and we will see you later.